Good evening, you are watching Green News in English. I am Sona Tumanyan. Coming up, new accusations on a volatile border as Azerbaijan paints Armenia as an instigator of war. Plus, a stunning verdict in a Paris courtroom says former president walk free. We're tracking a chaotic global news day. Stay with us. New rhetoric from Baku. Who is Aliyev blaming for the 44-day war now? What really happened in the Armenia-Azerbaijan peace talks? Bayramov reveals. A ticking time bomb. Will the explosive enclave dispute derail the peace process between Armenia and Azerbaijan? A diplomatic blitz in Yerevan. Armenia's top leaders meet with the EU ambassadors to discuss the strategic partnership. National defense was on the agenda as Armenia's military leadership concluded a 4-day operational meeting. November 9th is a true day of celebration for Azerbaijan. In the pages of history since the 44-day war, Azerbaijan has decided to assume the role of a peacekeeper, seeking to shed the label of aggressor. However, it does so by loudly voicing threats, once again calling Armenians the enemy and terrorists, and mocking the Armenians still held captive in Baku. This was a lavish military parade where President Aliyev, with particular grandeur, highlighted new acquisitions of military technology and the victories cemented on the map. By the way, an Azerbaijani prosecutor has demanded life imprisonment for Arai Kardsunian and David Babayan. The prosecutor also requested 20-year sentences for former presidents Bako Sahakyan and Arkady Ghukasyan, and terms ranging from 16 to 19 years for other officials. These details were reported by Azerbaijani state media.
Once again, on the occasion of November 9th, a victory day for them, but for us, a day of occupation of Armenian territories, Aliyev has come out with provocative, aggressive, and openly anti-Armenian statements.
Our youth, moving forward under enemy fire for 44 consecutive days, liberated our historical lands from the occupiers.
Aliyev doesn't miss any opportunity to remind about Azerbaijan's glorious victory, as he puts it, making false claims that Armenia was supposedly threatening Azerbaijan with a new war. Meanwhile, in all the years of his rule before 2020, he himself periodically threatened war. And in the years that followed, he responds to Armenia's messages of peace in the same way, only on international, especially European platforms, while in organizations of Turkic or Islamic states, he again uses the words enemies, occupiers, and separatists. Everyday conversations in Yerevan cafes have served as a basis for Aliyev, who has initialed a peace agreement with Armenia, to once again mock the Armenians.
They used to say that their tanks would be on the streets of Baku, that they would drink tea in Baku. In reality, their dreams have come true. We have brought them to life. Their tanks are on display today in the military trophies park, and the Armenian warmonger and criminals are standing before the court in Baku today and drinking Azerbaijani tea in a pre-trial detention center.
At this demonstrative celebration, which symbolized the so-called victory day of an Azerbaijani society fed by hatred and revenge for 3 decades, the leader of their brotherly nation, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, was also invited to the parade. Erdogan, who aspires to the role of father and leader of the Turkic-speaking world, declared that this occupation is a source of pride for all Turkic countries, thus hinting that Aliyev did not win the 44-day war alone.
Every step of the Azerbaijani army on the lands of Karabakh, every drop of blood shed for freedom and dignity has become a symbol of honor and has been written in golden letters on the pages of our common history, the history of the Turkic world.
Pakistan, which remains the only state that does not recognize Armenia, was also invited to the parade. A whole Pakistani military contingent had come to Baku to participate in the military parade. Prime Minister Mohammad Shahbaz Sharif, addressing his brother Ilham Aliyev, declared, "Now you are winning the peace," choosing not to hear his bluster and threats that if anyone tries to take any action or provocation against Azerbaijan, they will bitterly regret it.
Pakistan, Azerbaijan, and Turkey are 3 brothers whose hearts beat as one. The whole world witnessed with admiration how the brave armed forces of Azerbaijan liberated Karabakh, and throughout that entire struggle, Pakistan stood by brotherly Azerbaijan like a rock.
Aliyev and Erdogan look at the new Azerbaijani weapon systems with just this kind of pride. Among them are the Viking, mobile anti-aircraft complex designed to combat aircraft or drones, the Kyra, boat, which is an unmanned kamikaze motorboat intended to strike the enemy's naval targets. The Hero 120 unmanned aerial vehicle can loiter in the air for a long time and strike a target at the necessary moment. The Sky Striker Block 4 is a flying bomb like the Hero 120, but a more modern version. The Icebreaker is a cruise missile for striking distant targets both on land and at sea. The Predator Hawk is a long-range operational tactical missile system. New military cargo planes are used for transporting soldiers, weapons, and equipment. The JF-17 fighters are multifunctional military aircraft produced by Pakistan and China under a joint program. On the same day, Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan had published a video showing the new friend of the Armenian soldiers, a recon puppy. The day before, he had announced that citizens of Armenia could form groups of 50 to see the weaponry and equipment acquired by Armenia in recent years. The condition: to maintain secrecy.
Azerbaijan's Foreign Minister Ceyhun Bayramov is pulling back the curtain on the high-stakes diplomacy that took place during the 2020 Nagorno-Karabakh war, making bombshell claims about the previously undisclosed Russian ceasefire proposal and alleged threats from French President Emmanuel Macron. The revelations are seen as the latest move in a persistent information war, with Baku appearing to frame a narrative that shifts responsibility for the war's outcome onto Armenia. In an interview with Azerbaijan media, Bayramov claimed that just before the now famous November 9th trilateral agreement was signed, Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov offered a different deal. This alternative plan would have reportedly established an immediate ceasefire without requiring the transfer of territories outside the former Nagorno-Karabakh region to Azerbaijan. Instead, it proposed deploying Russian peacekeepers between Armenian and Azerbaijani forces along the existing lines of contact, a proposal that ultimately never materialized. Bayramov also alleged that during the 44-day conflict, President Macron of France repeatedly called Azerbaijan's President Ilham Aliyev, threatening to officially recognize Nagorno-Karabakh if the offensive didn't stop. According to Bayramov, Aliyev dismissed the threat, retorting that such a move would lead to an immediate rupture of diplomatic relations with Paris.
Imagine, it's October 30th and Zorab Natsakanyan says, "You can return Gulistan." At that moment, I thought that their perception of the situation was completely inadequate. I remembered the famous joke, "You can beat the Armenians at football, but you can't prove it to them."
In response to the claims, Armenia's prime minister stated that it is improper to refer to unrecorded verbal conversations. Turkey, which is currently in a process of normalizing relations with Armenia, is also offering high price for Azerbaijan. Returning from a trip to Baku, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan declared that after 30 years of instability, a window of opportunity has opened in the South Caucasus. He predicted that the conclusion of the peace process would very quickly make Azerbaijan the architect of peace in the region. As a point of context, the similarly named award was famously given to the US President Donald Trump for his role in the Abraham Accords, not to Azerbaijan's president. Meanwhile, in a separate but related announcement from Ankara, Turkey's Minister of Transport and Infrastructure Abdulkadir Uraloglu stated that work has begun on projects related to the so-called Zangezur corridor, which is said would transform Turkey into a logistics hub. According to the minister, the corridor project, along with the opening of the Alican border crossing with Armenia, will redefine Turkey's role in the regional trade network. Uraloglu confirmed that preparatory work has started at the Alican border crossing on the Turkish side of the border with Armenia. We have completed our planning, including an assessment of the current state of the bridge and its renovation, he said. The Turkish minister added that the Alican crossing will be opened once the peace process is finalized. Against the background of the Azerbaijani narratives of the trip corridor, the false Van-Goycha discourse, and the peace agenda, Nikol Pashinyan has given his commentary about the trip. The trip's railway will pass through the location of the one that operated in the Soviet Union, but work is still being carried out on the positioning of the remaining infrastructures.
The roadmap is as follows. By the end of the year, we must, so to speak, describe all the details on paper. We must reach an agreement in the first half of 2026, and construction work must begin in the second half.
Azerbaijan state media and official channels have begun actively circulating the topic of enclaves, indicating that Baku considers their return a top priority and insists the issue must be resolved during the ongoing border delimitation process. In response, Armenia's prime minister, addressing the context of the Artsvashen and Tigranashen territories, has stated that the delimitation process must first re-establish the outline of both Armenia's and Azerbaijan's territorial integrity. Only after that is restored, he said, can various options be discussed. The Prime Minister emphasized that if the process reaches the point of a potential exchange of territories, any such deal would be impossible without the approval of the citizens of the Republic of Armenia. What a concrete solution to this complex issue might look like remains unclear. Diana Karpetian has more on this topic in her report.
Baku issues an ultimatum, Yerevan counters with the principle of reciprocity. The past week has shown that one of the most volatile landmines in Armenian-Azerbaijani relations, the issue of enclaves and exclaves, is ready to explode. Authorities in Baku are not only demanding the immediate return of territories they consider enclaves from Armenia, but are also directly threatening new border tensions with their statements.
The return of the villages of the Gazakh region and the village of Karki in Nakhchivan is a constant focus for Azerbaijan. We will get them back.
Through the words of Hajizadeh, Baku is essentially blackmailing the peace process. The Azerbaijani side views the issue not as a matter of negotiation, but as an unequivocal demand, while this time, Yerevan is sharply countering by bringing up Armenia's de jure territory, Artsvashen.
As a result of delimitation, we must get back Artsvashen and the other occupied sovereign territories of the Republic of Armenia. Artsvashen is our territory. I cannot fail to speak about it. There are sections in Jermuk, Tavush, and Syunik.
Azerbaijan publicly ignores Armenian demands, not even addressing the occupation of our territories in the Sevlich area, Black Lake. They insist that the territories under Armenian control are subject to unconditional return.
Today there is one solution. We either have to exchange those enclaves because they are located on roads of great strategic importance to us, and it will turn out that those roads will come under Azerbaijani control, which I believe is very dangerous. In this respect, Artsvashen presents no problem for Azerbaijan. It is a very isolated islet that will not create any strategic complications for Azerbaijan.
Azerbaijani experts are also concerned about how the issue will be resolved. They note, but if there is no territorial exchange, these areas will become a catalyst for another armed conflict in the future.
The problem of resolving the fate of our 4 villages and Armenia's 1 village raises serious questions. I think, based on international experience, the best option here is a land swap. Otherwise, we will be forced to hand over Bashkend, the Azerbaijani name for Artsvashen, to Armenia, which means we will have to agree to the creation of an Armenian enclave in our country.
In response to the logic of the Azerbaijani ultimatum, Sargis Kandanyan, a deputy from the civil contract faction, countered that there can be no unilateral concessions.
All enclaves, including Artsvashen, must be put on the negotiating table. Any scenario of exchange or concessions that would violate the territorial integrity of the Republic of Armenia cannot happen without a referendum. There can be no talk of unilateral concessions.
This issue is not just about delimitation, but in reality, a legal war over territories. Yerevan insists that delimitation must be carried out based on the 1991 Alma-Ata Declaration and the legal borders drawn between Soviet Armenia and Azerbaijan. However, Azerbaijan continues to frame its demand as a restoration of land, completely ignoring the seizure of Armenia's de jure territory. Garnik Danielian recalled how 900 hectares from Berkaber were supposed to be transferred, but never were.
While the negotiation process slows down, the tense rhetoric surrounding the enclaves increases the risk of an outbreak of border tensions. By parading fighter jets in the streets of Baku, Aliyev is addressing this very issue, openly hinting at a military solution while trying to extract unilateral concessions from Yerevan.
The territory of Artsavashen is about 4,000 hectares, or 40 square kilometers. Since May 12, 2021, Azerbaijan has occupied another 215 to 241 square kilometers, according to various estimates. Meanwhile, the total area of the so-called Azerbaijani enclaves in Armenia is about 44 square kilometers. Diana Karpetyan, ReOpen Media.
As we in Armenia discuss the new reality of wheat arriving via Azerbaijan, Russia is already expressing its displeasure. Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service has accused Armenia of a politically motivated plan to break away from Moscow by purchasing more expensive Ukrainian grain with funds subsidized by the European Union. In a provocatively titled press release called The Kiss of Yerevan, the Russian intelligence agency claimed that France's foreign ministry was pleased with the news that Yerevan was ready to weaken another tie with Moscow. The SBR alleged that Armenia was planning to overpay for Ukrainian grain, with the EU covering the difference as a gesture of support for Kyiv. However, the claim was met with a swift and blunt denial from Yerevan. During a briefing with journalists at the National Assembly, Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan dismissed the report. It is absolute nonsense, he stated, firmly rejecting the notion that Armenia intends to abandon Russian grain in favor of Ukrainian imports. Armenia's top political and security leadership convened at the Ministry of Defense this week to brief the senior command of the armed forces on a sweeping overhaul of the nation's defense strategy. The briefings were part of a 4-day operational meeting that began on November 10, kicked off by Defense Minister Suren Papikyan, who addressed the ongoing reforms and the regional security situation. Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan held a dedicated meeting with the participants of the operational gathering, where he emphasized the critical importance of the Army's continuous modernization and the need for consistent, determined steps in that direction. According to the Prime Minister's office, the discussion delved into the military's long-term strategic vision. Key topics included a thorough assessment of the new regional security environment, the implementation of effective management systems within the armed forces, and strategies for developing human resources. The Secretary of the Security Council, Armen Grigoryan, delivered a keynote speech to the senior command on the same day. His presentation focused on a broader strategic concept, the vision for Armenia's comprehensive defense and security system. Secretary Grigoryan detailed the ongoing work to establish this framework, which aims to integrate all aspects of national power, not just military, into a unified defense posture. Armenia's top leadership held a series of strategic meetings also with the EU ambassadors this week to deepen political and security ties. The EU delegation led by Ambassador Vasilis Maragos met with the Prime Minister and parliamentary leaders to discuss the expanding partnership and pressing regional issues. Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan met with the envoys to review recent progress in Armenia-EU relations and outline future cooperation. The discussion covered the key items on their shared strategic agenda. National Assembly President Alen Simonian focused on strengthening parliamentary ties, briefing the ambassadors on Armenia's democratic reforms and the peace process with Azerbaijan. He specifically highlighted the unresolved issue of Armenian prisoners of war and detainees held in Baku. In his meeting, National Assembly Vice President Ruben Rubinian discussed the expanding Armenia-EU cooperation. He also provided a detailed update on the status of the normalization process between Armenia and Turkey. By the way, the series of meetings between Armenian officials and European Union ambassadors did not end there, with the President and key ministers also holding talks to advance the strategic partnership. President Vahagan Khachaturian met with the EU ambassadors to discuss the strategic direction of Armenia-EU relations and the country's key domestic and foreign policy priorities. He presented the main achievements of the past year, outlined future plans, and fielded questions from the envoys on Armenia's overall rural development. In a dedicated working lunch, Minister of Internal Affairs Arpine Sargsyan focused specifically on the visa liberalization process with the EU. She detailed the current reforms being implemented as part of the official action plan and answered the envoy's questions on the concrete steps toward achieving visa-free travel for Armenian citizens. And Security Council Secretary Armen Grigoryan provided a security-focused briefing presenting the details of the agreements reached between Armenia and Azerbaijan in Washington on August 8, which he stressed have established peace in the region. He also discussed the current Armenia-EU cooperation agenda and highlighted the recent progress on the visa liberalization file. For the second half of our broadcast, we turn our attention to the United States, as we traditionally do. We'll look at the latest developments in New York, see if the government shutdown has finally ended, and examine just how much tensions have escalated in the Caribbean. Politics meets fate inside the high-level meeting between Nancy Pelosi and Catholicos Aram I. The shutdown ends, but a new crisis is brewing. What is Trump doing in the Caribbean? A battle for the Big Apple. New York's new mayor takes on Donald Trump. Who will win? A legendary sculptor, an iconic square. Two Armenian treasures receive UNESCO's highest honor. The art world's biggest stage. Meet the artist representing Armenia at the Venice Biennale, Zadik Zadikyan. His Holiness Catholicos Aram I has visited the former Speaker of the U.S. Congress, Nancy Pelosi. During the meeting, which lasted more than an hour, Aram I and Pelosi discussed various issues from Armenia to Lebanon, the Middle East, and the Armenian-American community. A statement released by the Catholicos says that Nancy Pelosi has always stood by the Armenian community and has expressed her solidarity in the defense of the rights of the Armenian people. As a reminder, Pelosi visited Armenia about 3 years ago. In a push to expand Armenia's economic footprint in the United States, Ambassador Narek Mogorchan held a key meeting on November 11 with the senior leadership of the Bacon Council, Miami-Dade country's official economic development organization. The Bacon Council, a public-private partnership, plays a crucial role in the region by working closely with local authorities and the business community to attract high-value investments and stimulate economic growth. According to a statement from the Armenian embassy, the discussion with the Council's executive team, which included Executive Vice President Dr. Paula Hopkins and Vice President Julia Petty, centered on concrete opportunities for cooperation. The leadership of the Bacon Council expressed a strong readiness to support Armenian companies, offering to assist them in navigating entry into the dynamic Florida market and the wider American economy. The meeting marks a significant step in building a bridge between Armenia's growing business sector and one of America's key commercial hubs. After a prolonged political deadlock, the U.S. Senate has approved a bill to reopen the federal government. The measure, which passed with a vote of 60-40, raises hopes that the end of the longest shutdown in American history is approaching. The bill provides for the payment of back wages to the hundreds of thousands of government employees who were forced onto unpaid leave. As a reminder, the U.S. government partially suspended its operations on October 1st after Congress failed to reach an agreement on the federal budget. A new political fault line is emerging in the heart of New York City, raising a critical question. Is President Donald Trump losing his dominance in his own hometown, or is the narrative of his decline merely manufactured panic? At the center of this dynamic is the city's newly elected mayor, who has adopted a highly combative stance against Trump. Adding a significant layer to the political landscape, he is the city's first Muslim mayor, a fact that has already stirred divisive public opinion and national debate. Ideologically, the new mayor represents the polar opposite of Trump's political platform, setting the stage for a clash of worldviews. And because this confrontation is unfolding in arguably America's most influential and media-saturated metropolis, a direct shutdown seems not just likely, but inevitable. This isn't merely a local political squabble. It's shaping up to be a high-stakes battle for influence on one of the country's most important stages.
Amid a confrontation with the White House, New York's newly elected mayor Zohran Mamdani visited a mosque in San Juan, Puerto Rico, where he was met with cheers. Mamdani was participating in an annual summit that brings together New York politicians. He prayed in the mosque with other Muslims and helped distribute food. Mamdani made veiled references opposing Trump's expansionist and anti-immigration policies.
What we know is Puerto Rico no se vende. And we say the same thing in New York City. Nueva York no se vende. You cannot buy these cities. We must, in fact, stand up to ensure that every New Yorker can afford these cities. And the same be true for our Puerto Rican brothers and sisters that are here.
This visit took place immediately after a series of attacks voiced by President Donald Trump against the newly elected mayor. Trump had cast doubt on Mamdani's influence on the city's infrastructure development, calling him a communist.
Well, I think you have to look. If he is a communist, you know there's not going to be a lot of activity. So you wouldn't need bridges and tunnels and all the different things that were being planned for New York, I think. And look, I hope New York does well. That's all I can say. I love New York. I grew up in New York. I did well in New York, always did well. And I hope New York does well.
While the president is focused on denigrating political opponents, Mamdani is moving forward with forming his administration. In Queens, he introduced his transition team, promising to create a capable and compassionate administration. He reaffirmed his priorities, tackling the city's cost of living crisis and restoring public trust.
Donald Trump ran a presidential campaign with the promise of cheaper groceries. Donald Trump ran a presidential campaign committing to lowering the cost of living. What our success will show is that it is not enough to diagnose the despair in working class Americans' lives. You have to actually deliver on the agenda. And that is what we intend to do each and every day while we are in home.
The 34-year-old Democratic socialist, Mamdani, celebrated his historic victory on November 4th, becoming the first South Asian and Muslim mayor in New York's history. He defeated the former governor, 67-year-old Andrew Cuomo, who ran as an independent candidate after resigning 4 years ago due to sexual harassment allegations. Experts highlight Mamdani's modern campaign and his masterful use of social media, particularly TikTok, through which he was able to energize a new generation of young voters.
Rent-free, free buses, universal childcare.
I don't think that you're going to find affordable housing popping up everywhere in the next year or two. So New York is not going to be the paradise that Mamdani wants it overnight, and the President Trump will use that to his effect in campaigning, in helping campaigns for folks running in 2026.
Experts state that this clash between New York's newly elected mayor and the U.S. president vividly illustrates the deep political division in the country. This tension runs parallel to a national crisis as the 40-day-long government shutdown leaves the daily lives of millions of Americans in uncertainty. A bill moving forward in the Senate to resume funding for federal agencies, which has also been supported by some Democrats, could partially pull the government out of its paralyzed state. Due to the absence of air traffic controllers alone, more than 2,800 flights were canceled and over 10,200 were delayed on Sunday.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has flatly denied reports of a contentious meeting with Donald Trump, pushing back against claims that the U.S. president threatened him and threw maps aside. In an interview with The Guardian, which was briefly interrupted by a power outage in Kyiv's Mariinsky Palace, Zelensky offered his own account of the October 17 meeting. He rejected the Financial Times report that Trump had demanded he accept Russia's terms for peace. He didn't say anything like that, I'm sure of it, Zelensky stated. Instead, he said the Ukrainian delegation presented 3 posters outlining their strategy to weaken Moscow through weapons, supplies, and sanctions to bring them to the negotiating table. Zelensky also insisted he is not afraid of Donald Trump. Everyone in the world is afraid of Trump. We're not enemies of America. We're friends. So what should we be afraid of? He said, calling the United States a strategic partner. In a surprising revelation, Zelensky credited Britain's King Charles III with helping him build a relationship with Trump, noting that the U.S. leader respects the monarch and considers him a very important person. In another chapter for the history book, Syrian President Ahmed al-Shara completed a stunning diplomatic transformation this week, moving from Washington's terror list to the Oval Office. Just months ago, the U.S. was offering a $10 million reward for his capture. On Monday, President Donald Trump was offering him cologne. For those who have always wanted to bottle the essence of political triumph, your moment has arrived. Donald Trump has unveiled his latest olfactory offering, a fragrance aptly named Trump's Victory. Promising the scent of success, this unisex perfume ensures that victory apparently has no gender. The true centerpiece, however, is the bottle, which comes topped with the gilded, gold-plated statuette of the man himself, allowing his likeness to grace your vanity. And the price for smelling like a historic win? A mere $250. After offering another bottle for his wife, Trump casually asked, "How many wives?" When al-Shara replied, "One." Trump quipped, "With you guys, I never know." The visit made possible after the U.S. temporarily suspended crippling sanctions underscores a dramatic geopolitical pivot. The man, once designated a terrorist by the United States, has now been received as a head of state, with a potential joint fight against other Islamists now reportedly on the table, a remarkable turn of events for the former al-Qaeda-linked commander.
Donald Trump hosted Syrian President Ahmed al-Shara at the White House. Al-Shara was previously a commander of one of al-Qaeda's affiliates and until recently was on Washington's terrorist blacklist. He is now trying to win Syria's decades of international isolation. Furthermore, in interviews with American media, al-Shara has expressed the view that former leader Bashar al-Assad must be held accountable.
I mean, Russia has participated in one way or another in the war against the people of Syria. So part of the negotiations that took place with Syria is that those who are wanted should be surrendered to Syria, including Bashar al-Assad. The Russians have a different opinion. However, justice must prevail. We have established a justice commission or transitional justice commission so that everyone can be held accountable for what they did, including Bashar al-Assad.
Interestingly, after al-Shara's group came to power, mass killings of Druze and Alawites took place in eastern Syria, some of which were broadcast live. Back in October, during a meeting with journalists from Arab countries, Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov stated that Assad and his family members are in Russia for purely humanitarian reasons, as the former president faced the threat of physical retribution in his homeland. Incidentally, this is the first time a Syrian president has visited the White House since the founding of that state. According to al-Shara, after the fall of the former regime, Syria has entered a new era, and this will serve as the basis for a new strategy, especially in relations with the United States. After the meeting, Trump also announced that there will be some announcements regarding Syria in the near future, adding that he had a good interaction with the country's president and that they will be able to work together.
Well, I've had an agreement with him. He's a very strong leader. He comes from a very tough place, and he's a tough guy. I liked him. I get along with him, the new president of Syria. And we'll do everything we can to make Syria successful because that's part of the Middle East. We have peace now in the Middle East, first time that anyone can remember that ever happening.
On the same day, Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan was also at the White House, meeting with Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Fidan later announced that he held separate negotiations in Washington with several American officials and his Syrian counterpart, discussing the ongoing developments in Syria and Gaza. David Janjoyan, ReOpen Media.
In a move rich with irony from the leader of the self-proclaimed homeland of free speech, President Donald Trump is threatening to sue one of the world's most prominent news outlets, the BBC. Trump alleges the broadcaster deliberately distorted his January 6th speech to pin the blame for the Capitol attack directly on him. The dispute stems from a BBC Panorama documentary that allegedly edited two parts of Trump's speech together, creating the impression he was calling for a violent assault. According to Trump's lawyers, the BBC internationally omitted the crucial phrase where he urged supporters to march peacefully and patriotically. While the BBC's leadership has already issued a public apology and its head of news has resigned, Trump isn't backing down. This media offensive comes as his first significant legal troubles have largely subsided since his re-election. The federal cases regarding classified documents on January 6 were closed, citing presidential immunity. In the infamous hush money trial, he was convicted on 34 felony counts but avoided prison time, a case now under appeal. For a leader whose name has been linked to over 4,000 legal cases, this shutdown with the BBC is just the latest front in a lifelong war fought in the courtroom. Tensions in the Caribbean are reaching a boiling point, sparking fears of a new crisis as a magnificent U.S. military buildup ordered by President Trump is met by a defiant nationwide military mobilization in Venezuela. The U.S. mission officially aimed at destroying drug trafficking vessels is being dismissed by Caracas as smokescreen. President Maduro alleges the operation is a pretext for a U.S.-backed coup, a charge that fuels the escalating standoff. In response, Venezuela has launched massive war games, placing the country on a war footing. The situation has drawn increasing warnings from the international community, which is watching the high-stakes confrontation with growing alarm.
De los comandos de defensa integral a nivel nacional.
Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro has signed a new national defense law, ordering the immediate activation of integral defense commands to unite civilian and military forces. In his address, Maduro called for readiness for a fight, even with weapons in hand, to defend Venezuela's sovereignty.
We condemn the fact that for more than 10 years, the people of Venezuela have been subjected to all kinds of aggressions by the North American empire. Economic, political, conspiratorial, and now military aggression and threats.
The large-scale military police exercises, Deployment of Independence Forces 2025, and Independence Plan 200 have been launched across the country. The Venezuelan parliament has definitively approved the new defense legislation, which the president of the parliament, Jorge Rodriguez, described as historic.
Well, there is a unanimous rejection in the world against imperialist aggression and against the United States' aspiration to remain the world's hegemon and gendarme. And we here in Venezuela are unwaveringly loyal to the Bolivarian ideals of our people's independence, freedom, and full sovereignty.
These steps are being taken amidst an unprecedented buildup of American military power in the Caribbean basin. The United States military is modernizing the former Roosevelt Roads Naval Station in Puerto Rico, which was closed more than 20 years ago. At least 13 warships, a nuclear submarine, fighter jets, and the USS Gerald R. Ford Carrier Strike Group with about 10,000 military personnel have been moved to the region. Since September, the U.S. has carried out 19 strikes against ships off the coast of Venezuela, claiming they were transporting drugs. According to the U.S. Secretary of Defense, more than 76 people have been killed as a result of these strikes. However, Washington has not presented any evidence, which has drawn international criticism.
It's chilling to me to see those scenes of the United States of America blowing up boats with no transparency, no advise and consent with the United States Congress, the representatives of my country, with briefings that are laughable that members of Congress, both the House and the Senate, including Republicans, have criticized. If you can't criticize that, what the hell can you criticize?
France is concerned about the United States military operations in the Caribbean basin. State Administrator for Europe and Foreign Affairs Jean-Noël Barrot on the sidelines of the G7 Foreign Ministers Summit in Canada.
We are following the military operations in the Caribbean region with concern because they violate international law and because France is present in the region through its overseas territories, where more than 1 million of our compatriots live who could be affected by the instability resulting from any escalation, which we obviously want to avoid.
Colombian President Gustavo Petro has ordered his country's security forces to cease sharing intelligence data with the United States until the Trump administration stops its strikes on alleged drug traffickers in the Caribbean basin. Meanwhile, Panamanian authorities have announced the seizure of tens of tons of drugs in the Pacific Ocean. Among the 10 crew members arrested were citizens of Venezuela, Ecuador, Nicaragua, Peru, and Colombia.
This is a historic seizure, more than 11,000 kilograms of suspected cocaine. We are still awaiting the forensic report. This seizure obviously deals a heavy blow to organized crime, considering that this vessel intended to sail across the Pacific Ocean to North America.
Experts warn that the Caribbean basin is turning into a complex crisis hub, where the fight against drug trafficking is becoming merely a veil to conceal much larger geopolitical games. Although Washington labels its actions as a counter-narcotics operation, the unprecedented scale of the military presence indicates a level of preparation whose scope far exceeds the boundaries of the declared mission. David Genjoyan, ReOpen Media.
Former French President Nicolas Sarkozy has been released from prison, having served a 20-day sentence. His release marks the end of his detention following a conviction in the high-profile case concerning campaign financing linked to funds from the late Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi. And great news from UNESCO. At its recent conference in Samarkand, the organization decided to add 2 important anniversaries from Armenia to its special 2026-2027 calendar of famous people and events. The calendar will honor the 150th birthday of the celebrated linguist Rhetoric and the 100th anniversary of the start of construction on Yerevan's iconic Republic Square in 1927. According to Armenia's foreign ministry, this continues a great tradition. Since 1998, UNESCO has included a total of 31 anniversaries submitted by Armenia in its special calendar. This latest recognition by UNESCO continues a proud tradition of honoring Armenia's contributions to world heritage. The prestigious roster of past honorees includes some of the nation's most iconic figures. In the arts, UNESCO has previously celebrated composers like Aram Khachaturian and Komitas. In literature, it has recognized national poet Hovannes Tumanyan and Pulitzer Prize-winning author William Saroyan. The calendar has also featured scientific pioneers such as renowned astrophysicist Victor Hambartsumian and major historical milestones, including the 2800th anniversary of the founding of Yerevan. These selections consistently highlight the enduring impact of Armenian culture and intellect on the global stage. We end our broadcast tonight with a look at the world of art, where history often provides the most beautiful prelude to the present. Imagine the scene: Venice, 1895, the very first Biennale. In the absence of a dedicated pavilion, 21 British artists exhibited their work in a shared room. The event was a staggering success, drawing over 200,000 visitors. As the years passed and Britain's artistic presence grew more powerful, it earned its own distinct space: the British Pavilion, a testament to the power of a nation's growing artistic voice on the world stage. For over a century, that same dream has echoed for nations across the globe to have their story, their vision, presented in the heart of the art world. And now, as we look to 2026, Armenia prepares to add its own unique voice to that prestigious chorus. The results are in for the Armenian Pavilion at the 61st Venice Biennale. Under the evocative theme In Minor Keys, Armenia will be represented by visual artist Zadik Zadikyan with his project Ode to Lord Byron. The project will be guided by the world-renowned curatorial vision of Tony Shafrazi and Tina Shakaryan, and perhaps no theme could be more fitting. A project titled Ode to Lord Byron, a tribute to a poet of freedom and rebellion, presented in minor keys. It speaks of intimacy, of history's quiet sorrows, and of a beauty that persists not with a roar, but with a resilient, melancholic melody. On the world stage, art becomes more than just an exhibition. It becomes a nation's soul, translated into color, form and emotion. And in Venice, under the Italian sky, the world will be invited not just to see, but to listen. This much for today. I am Sona Tumanian. Stay informed with ReNews. Good night.